He didn't wait for her to stop shaking. Claudia Reeves had been on the operating table for 40 minutes when the surgeon finally said the words she'd been dreading for 9 months and celebrating in the same breath. She's here. She's healthy. The anesthesia was still pulling at the edges of her vision. Her hands were trembling. The nurse placed the baby against her chest. This impossibly small thing with her father's dark eyebrows and her grandmother's wide forehead, and Claudia felt something crack open inside her that she didn't have a name for yet. That's when the door opened. She thought it was the pediatrician. She thought it was her mother, who had driven 4 hours from Raleigh and was supposedly waiting in the hallway. She even thought, for one disoriented, hopeful second, that it was her husband coming back from wherever he'd disappeared to during the last hour of labor. It was her husband, but he wasn't alone. Daniel Reeves walked into the recovery room in his gray blazer, the one she'd picked out for him at Nordstrom 2 Christmases ago, and he was holding a manila envelope. Standing just behind his left shoulder was a woman Claudia had met exactly once, at a company dinner 14 months prior. Thin, red dress. The kind of woman who looks at a wife the way someone looks at a house they've already made an offer on. Her name was Portia Sloan. Daniel set the envelope on the edge of the hospital bed, next to Claudia's IV line. He didn't look at the baby. He didn't ask how she was doing. He glanced at the monitors, the way a person checks the weather before leaving the house, briefly, without real interest, and then he looked at Claudia, with the expression she'd been watching him practice for months without understanding what it meant. "I need you to sign these," he said, "before you leave the hospital." Claudia looked down at her daughter. The baby's mouth was doing that searching thing, that reflex that means nothing and means everything. Her name was already decided. Lily, and Claudia had been carrying that name in her chest for 6 months like a private treasure. "Sign what?" she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Divorce papers." He said it the way you say, "Check, please," at the end of a meal you didn't enjoy. "My attorney has already filed. I just need your signature to move things along." The nurse in the corner of the room went very still. Claudia didn't cry. That surprised her later when she replayed it. She'd always assumed that if this moment ever came, and somewhere beneath all the dinner parties and the anniversary trips and the convincing herself she was imagining things, she had always half known it might, she would fall apart. She'd imagined herself begging, bargaining, saying please like a person drowning reaches for anything floating. Instead, she looked at Portia Sloan standing in the doorway of a hospital recovery room while Claudia's stitches were still fresh, and she felt something very cold and very clear move through her. "Get out," Claudia said. "Claudia, you brought her here." She didn't raise her voice. "You brought her into this room. Today. Get out of this room, Daniel. Both of you. Right now." He started to say something about the paperwork. He used the words clean break and what's best for everyone, and Claudia watched his mouth move and thought about the fact that she had not eaten in 19 hours, and her daughter was 4 minutes old, and her husband was explaining to her, in a hospital recovery room, that he had chosen someone else. The nurse pressed a call button. 2 orderlies appeared within 90 seconds. Daniel tried to protest. He used the phrase, "she's my wife," with a kind of ownership that had already stopped being true the moment he walked in with that envelope. And one of the orderlies, a broad-shouldered man named Kenny, according to his badge, said very quietly, "Sir, you need to leave this floor." Portia left without being asked twice. Daniel left loudly, the way men do when they realize they have no actual leverage but haven't accepted it yet. The door closed. Claudia sat in the silence with her daughter on her chest and the unopened envelope on the edge of the bed, and she breathed. She had met Daniel Reeves at 31 at a fundraiser for a children's hospital in downtown Charlotte. He was charming in a way that felt like sunlight, warm, directionless, available to everyone in the room. She was a real estate attorney, with her own practice, 3 years in, still building. He was a VP at a mid-sized pharmaceutical firm, ambitious, funny, the kind of man who remembered what you'd ordered the last time you'd gone to a restaurant together. She had loved him. She wanted to be clear about that, even just to herself. She had loved him genuinely, the way you love something you chose with your full attention. Not the lazy love of convenience or loneliness. She had chosen him, and she had meant it, and she had kept meaning it for 6 years, even while the meaning got harder to locate. The first time she noticed something was wrong, she was 7 weeks pregnant. She'd come home early from a deposition. Her back had been aching all day, the kind of deep pelvic ache her OB had told her was normal, and that felt profoundly not normal. And Daniel's car was in the driveway at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. She'd thought, for a happy second, that he'd come home to take care of her. He was on the phone in the study, speaking quietly. When she opened the door, he ended the call in one motion, the way you close a laptop when someone walks in. He said it was work. He said it was a sensitive deal they were negotiating. He said she was reading into things, which he had started saying with increasing frequency around month 4. She hadn't confronted him directly. She'd gone back to being an attorney instead. She'd started paying attention the way she paid attention in depositions. Not reacting, just cataloging. The pattern of late meetings that never appeared on his shared calendar. The new password on his phone. The twice-canceled dinner plans in October, both times with the explanation client emergency, and both times she later checked. On evenings when the pharmaceutical firm had been closed for a company retreat. By month 7, she was almost certain. By month 8, she had called her attorney, not her firm, a colleague she trusted, and had a quiet, hypothetical conversation about what she would need to document if she ever wanted to protect herself. By month 9, she had done something Daniel didn't know about. Something she had been doing, quietly and carefully, for the better part of 2 years before any of this, for reasons that had nothing to do with him. The envelope sat on the hospital bed, unopened, for 4 hours. Her mother arrived. Her sister arrived. Claudia fed Lily for the first time while her mother cried, and her sister took photographs, and nobody mentioned the manila envelope until Claudia's mother picked it up and said, "What's this?" "Divorce papers," Claudia said. Her mother sat down hard in the visitor's chair. "He served you today?" He came in person. With her. The room went quiet in a specific way. The kind of quiet that happens when women understand something without having to say it. The hospital kept her for 2 days, standard after the C-section. Daniel did not come back. He sent a text on the second night. "I know this is hard. My attorney will be in touch," which Claudia read once and did not respond to. On the morning of day 2, she called her colleague Rebecca Thorne, who had handled the hypothetical conversation 8 months ago, and who had since then been handling some things that were no longer hypothetical. "He filed," Claudia told her. "I know," Rebecca said. "I saw the filing this morning. How are you? I have a 2-day-old daughter and 14 stitches, and I need to know where we stand." Rebecca was quiet for a moment, in the way of someone choosing their words with care. "We stand," she said slowly, "in a very interesting position. Here is what Daniel Reeves believed about his wife's financial situation. He believed she ran a small real estate law practice, moderately successful, that handled residential closings and some commercial contracts. He believed she earned about $180,000 a year, which was accurate. He believed that most of what they owned together, the house in Dilworth, the rental property in Asheville, the investment accounts, was joint marital property that would be divided roughly down the middle in a divorce. He did not know about the land. It wasn't a secret, exactly. It was more that Daniel had never been particularly curious about the parts of Claudia's life that predated him, and Claudia had never found a reason to make him curious. Her grandfather, a man named Russell Fletcher, who had farmed tobacco in eastern North Carolina for 40 years, and then spent the last 20 years of his life quietly buying land the way other men buy lottery tickets, had died when Claudia was 26. He had left everything to her. Not her parents, not her cousins, her. Because she was the one, he'd told her in the last year of his life, who actually understood what land was for. What Russell Fletcher had left her was 2,200 acres of land in 3 counties, held in a trust that Claudia had managed quietly and carefully for 5 years before she ever met Daniel Reeves. She'd worked with a land trust attorney, a tax advisor, and a conservation easement specialist. She'd done it right. The trust was structured in her name, premarital, properly documented as separate property, and it had appreciated in ways that were not dramatic or sudden, but were instead the slow geological kind of appreciation that comes from holding something when everyone else is selling. Current value, approximately $14 million. Daniel's attorney, a sharp man named Jeffrey Carr, who handled executive divorces and clearly believed this would be routine, sent over an asset disclosure request 3 days after Claudia came home from the hospital. Rebecca called her. They want everything. Income, assets, the practice. Give them everything, Claudia said. She was nursing Lily on the couch, watching rain streak the window of the house she had bought before she married Daniel and had allowed him to move into without ever fully explaining the ownership structure. All of it. Every document. The trust documentation, the land surveys, the county tax records, all of it. Rebecca paused. You sure? I want Jeffrey Carr to open that file and understand immediately what kind of situation his client has walked into. I don't want it to be a surprise later. I want it to be a surprise now. It took Jeffrey Carr approximately 48 hours to call Daniel. Claudia wasn't in that conversation. She learned about it secondhand from Daniel's brother Kevin, who had always liked Claudia more than he liked his brother's decisions, and who called her on a Thursday evening to say, carefully, I don't think Daniel understood what he was doing. He understood he wanted a divorce, she said. He didn't understand about the land. No, she agreed. He didn't. Kevin was quiet. Then, he's not a bad person, Claudia. She thought about the recovery room, the manila envelope on the edge of the bed, Portia Sloane in the doorway in her good coat. Her daughter, 4 minutes old, held against her chest while her husband explained that he had somewhere else to be. Kevin, she said gently, I know you love your brother, but I need you to understand that what he did in that hospital room was not something that a not bad person does. He made a choice. He made it very deliberately. And now we're all dealing with the consequences of that choice. Kevin didn't argue. Jeffrey Carr requested a mediation session 2 weeks later. His tone, according to Rebecca, had shifted considerably from the initial filing, where he had originally sent the asset disclosure request with the breezy confidence of someone who expected this to be over quickly. He now arrived at the mediator's office in downtown Charlotte with a noticeably thicker file and a noticeably quieter manner. Daniel was there. Claudia hadn't seen him since the hospital. He looked the same and entirely different in the way of someone you've known so long that any change in them reads as enormous. He was wearing the blue tie she'd given him for their 4th anniversary. She wondered if he'd done that consciously, or if it was just the tie that was clean. He tried to speak to her in the elevator, just the two of them for 30 seconds before the doors opened. Claudia, I want you to know that I... Save it for when there are lawyers present, she said. Not unkindly, just cleanly. The mediation session lasted 4 hours. Jeffrey Carr's initial position had been aggressive. He wanted to argue that some of the land trust's appreciated value occurred during the marriage and was therefore subject to division, a creative but fairly thin argument given the trust documentation. Rebecca had anticipated this. She had a land trust specialist and a forensic accountant ready. The trail was clean. The trust predated the marriage by 5 years. The appreciation was passive, not the result of any marital contribution. The argument dissolved inside of 90 minutes. What was left was the marital property, the Dilworth house, Claudia's, purchased before the marriage, his name added to the deed 3 years in as an estate planning gesture she now deeply regretted. The Asheville rental, the joint accounts, the investment portfolio they'd built together. Claudia had thought hard about this part. She wasn't vindictive. She didn't want to punish him. She wanted to be honest about what she needed, and what she was owed, and what kind of starting point she needed for a life that now included a daughter and a practice, and $14 million in land, and not a husband. She took the house. She kept the Asheville rental. She gave him the investment portfolio, which was significant, and she waived any claim on his pension and his deferred compensation, which together were worth considerably more than most people in this room would have expected her to give up. Jeffrey Carr looked at the proposal for a long moment. Then he looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at Claudia. Why? He said. Just that. She thought about it. Because I'm not interested in making you suffer. I'm interested in being done. He signed within the week. Portia Sloane was at his apartment by the end of that month. Claudia knew because Kevin told her, and because she didn't particularly try not to know. She had no anger left for Portia. She understood the geometry of it. A man who is looking for an exit will find a door, and whoever opens it will believe, for a while, that she is the reason for everything. She wasn't. Daniel had been leaving for years. Portia had just handed him the paperwork. What Claudia felt instead in those first weeks, weeks that were simultaneously the hardest of her life and the most clarifying, was something she could only describe as the strange relief of a broken arm finally being set. Everything hurt, but at least it was in the right position now. Lily was a good baby. That felt important to say, even just in the privacy of her own thoughts. In those 3 a.m. nursing sessions where the whole world reduces to one lamp and one small breathing person. Lily slept in 3-hour stretches, which was more than Claudia had expected. She made sounds in her sleep that seemed to mean something. She wrapped her hand around Claudia's finger with a grip that felt like a promise. Her mother stayed for 6 weeks. Her sister came on weekends. Rebecca handled the final divorce filings with efficiency and minimal drama. Claudia took 8 weeks of leave from the practice, which her 2 partners managed without complaint. And during those 8 weeks, between feeding and visits and the paperwork that a divorce generates even when it's relatively clean, Claudia started thinking about the land. Russell Fletcher had not been a complicated man. He'd grown up with little, built something through patience and consistency, and had one strong belief about wealth. It was only worth having if you used it for something that would outlast you. He hadn't tried to talk to Claudia about his estate while she was in law school, or just after. He'd waited until she was 25, and had been practicing for a year, and had come to visit him on her own, driving down to his farmhouse without being asked. He'd taken her out to walk the farthest field on a February morning, both of them in their coats, and he'd said, "I'm going to leave you all of this. I need to know you understand what I mean by that." She'd said she understood. "No," he'd said, not unkindly. "Tell me what you think it means." She'd said, "It means I'm responsible for it, not just owning it, taking care of it, using it in a way that matters." He'd nodded. There it is. She had spent 5 years managing the trust quietly, doing the careful work of responsible stewardship, conservation agreements on the most ecologically significant parcels, careful negotiation with county planning offices on others, a small timber management arrangement on the acreage in Nash County. She'd done it all without drama, without publicity, without it ever appearing in the press or on any document that Daniel had occasion to read. Now, 8 weeks postpartum, sitting in the kitchen of the house she had won back cleanly, feeding Lily at 6 in the morning with the first real light coming through the window, she picked up the phone and called the conservation organization she'd been in preliminary conversations with for 3 years. "I'm ready," she told the program director. "Let's talk about the easement." The arrangement she was working toward would place permanent conservation restrictions on just over 900 acres in Bertie County, preserving the agricultural and wetland character of the land in perpetuity in exchange for a significant tax benefit and a naming opportunity that she'd already decided would honor her grandfather. The remaining acreage she had other plans for, a community land trust partnership she'd been designing quietly for 2 years, aimed at affordable rural housing, the kind of initiative that doesn't make fast money, but makes the kind of difference you can still see in 30 years. It was, she thought, exactly what her grandfather had meant. Daniel called once, in Lily's 3rd month. It was a Sunday afternoon. Claudia almost didn't answer, and then she did. "I've been wanting to say something," he said. She waited. "What I did, how I did it, was wrong. I know that. I think I knew it when I was doing it. I don't have an explanation that makes it better." She believed him. That was the strange thing. She believed that he meant it, that he was genuinely sorry, that somewhere inside whatever he'd been doing, and whoever he'd been becoming in those last years, he had understood that walking into a recovery room 4 minutes after she'd delivered their child was something he couldn't walk back from. She believed his regret was real. It didn't change anything. Not because she was unwilling to forgive, but because forgiveness and relevance were 2 different things. She could forgive him completely and still have absolutely no interest in reorganizing her life around his remorse. "I hear you, Daniel," she said. "I hope you're okay. I hope Lily gets to know you, and I mean that. But I'm not the person to help you feel better about this. I have other things to do now." She hung up. Lily was on her playmat making concentrated efforts at a plastic giraffe. Outside, the October light was doing that specific afternoon thing where it turns everything amber and unearned and beautiful. Claudia watched her daughter for a moment. Then she picked up her phone again and called Rebecca. The Conservancy wants to move forward, she said. And I need to set up a meeting with the Community Land Trust people. Can we schedule that for next week? Absolutely, Rebecca said. How are you doing? Claudia looked at Lily, who had gotten a grip on the giraffe and appeared to find this enormously satisfying. I'm good, she said, and it was the first time since the hospital that she'd said it and meant it without any qualification at all. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in November, 17 weeks after Claudia had come home from the hospital with 14 stitches and a daughter and an unsigned envelope she'd handed directly to Rebecca without ever opening herself. She didn't go to the courthouse. Rebecca handled the submission. Claudia was in a meeting with the conservation organization and a county commissioner and a soil scientist named Dr. Patricia Okafor, who had been mapping the wetland habitats on the Bertie County parcels for 3 years, and who had the specific quiet excitement of a person who has waited a long time to do work that matters. Her phone buzzed at 11:47 a.m. Rebecca. It's done. Claudia looked at the message. Then she looked at the maps spread across the conference table. 900 acres of her grandfather's land, every field and drainage ditch and tree line, marked with the careful notation of someone who intended to protect it. She thought about Russell Fletcher walking her out to that farthest field on a February morning. The cold, the flat light. His voice, patient and matter-of-fact, asking her what she thought it meant. She thought she was finally able to answer him properly. She put her phone in her pocket and looked back at the maps. Okay, she said to the room. Let's talk about what we're building here.